Hey, it's Drybear. 3 ultimate weapons were reworked in the last First Descendant update. So today we're gonna go through all 3 of them together, what's different, and I'm gonna give you updated efficiency builds for the best builds for each of the weapons and talk about what's changed. So these are the 3 weapons. It was Final Masterpiece, Perforator, and Albion Cavalry Gun. And rather than doing each weapon separately, I think because they all came together in a package, I'm just gonna put them all together here. So this is the full complete build for each of them, bringing out the best based on what they're good at and their stats and all that with their rerolls as well as the change in the DPS based on what goes on. Now keep in mind that Perforator I'm describing is basically a one-handed or little baby Greg's Reverse Fate now because it fires off AoEs. So these numbers are going to be based on hitting 3 targets with the AoE instead of hitting 1, and the AoE damage is added in and rolled in there. You technically can get AoE damage from the Final Masterpiece as well, and you'll get a little boost there, but I think overall the Final Masterpiece, while still significantly better than it was before, still needs a little bit of love on the power strike, or maybe if it could work with things like sharp precision shot or mental focus based on the size of the weapon and the magazine, it could possibly get some more there, but I think it still needs a lot more power increase for what it does, but it is way better than it was before. Starting with the Final Masterpiece, this weapon used to have a rotating buff system that would stack if you got lucky, but just like Roll the Bones in World of Warcraft, that no one really likes relying on RNG all that much, especially if they're trying to do regular damage. So the way this got changed is they gave it a little bit of a firearm attack boost. I still think it needs another base firearm attack boost for what it does, but now after you shoot and reload, you will then have a chance to proc an AoE elemental explosion, and then it cycles through these elements every time you reload. So now that we've reloaded, you can see that it has a chance to spawn poison. We'll reload, and it'll go to the next element, which is fire. We'll reload, it'll go to the next element, which is cold, and it'll go to the last element, which is electric. You'll notice the distance on that is pretty good. So all of these rotate through. They're all about 30% of your firearm attack when the weapon is fully maxed out, except for poison. If you happen to get poison to tick multiple times and the full duration goes, it can go anywhere from 42 to 60% of your firearm attack in total damage, because not only does it create a puddle on the ground, but also has an application of poison on the target that will run its duration and refresh while it's on the puddle. So you'll get technically more value, up to double value from the poison element, just because it has a deployable that lingers and a dot effect that refreshes, which will extend its duration overall. But in general, I think the weapon is a lot better than it was before. You still get good damage out of it. When you max out the weapon, the explosion radius goes up to 5 meters, which means you get some AoE. It's not going to be so massive that you'll be able to get AoE all the time, but you will still get good AoE coming out of it, which will give it some nice AoE splash as well. And you can have some synergies with some characters depending on the element that you're using. For the Final Masterpiece, unfortunately, all you have really is Real Life Fighter or Sweeping Squad for your special. This is because the mag size is so small, you can't really take advantage of mental focus or sharp precision shot in any meaningful way, just because you're going to be reloading too often and resetting that too often. So Sweeping Squad will give you a nice flat bonus. Sweeping Squad in this case will outperform like an Elemental Conductor just by a little bit, and is a little more consistent. And then in this case, you can use Real Life Fighter, but I put this one as an alternate because I know a lot of people are like religiously against Real Life Fighter. If you say Real Life Fighter, one of their eyeballs will pop out and their pants will drop to the floor and they'll spit on the ground and start hawk-tuing. I don't even know. So we've got a good balance here. Now, because of the stats on the Final Masterpiece, we have action, reaction, and bullet integration in this case. Charge amplification would be better for Perforator, but bullet integration does actually overtake it. It has okay stats for crit rate and crit damage scaling, and bullet integration will outperform. We run rifling reinforcement to get more firearm attack. This will give the shots more damage, as well as the damage coming off from the passive as well. Elemental enhancement will work great because it will bounce off and do bonus, just like it will with Albion Cavalry Gun once we get there. Better concentration, fire rate up, better insight, expand weapon charge, and reload focus, just because the mag size is a little bit small, it being a handgun, and the reload time is a big factor because you'll be reloading quite a lot. For the rerolls, firearm attack, bonus attack versus Colossus, flat elemental damage, you'll want to match this with your elemental enhancement. So if you do like fire enhancement, you want to do flat fire damage on that, plus crit strike damage. The only caveat I'll add to this build for the Final Masterpiece is that with the bonus versus Colossi, If you don't intend to use this for bossing at all, you have a couple options for this weapon. You could work in crit chance if you wanted to, or max rounds would be pretty decent as well on this. You could also run with one of the different factions for fighting, like bonus versus immortality or something like that. Crit rate or weak point is probably your best bet, but it's going to fall off significantly from there. So if you don't intend to use the Final Masterpiece for anything other than mobbing, you can drop bonus versus attack versus Colossus and put crit chance or weak point on there instead, just to get a little bit more use out of it for your mobbing scenarios. Moving on to the Perforator, and I mentioned this in the update video, I'm a little sad that the passive went away because it was the only weapon effect in the entire game that did bonus damage to shields, which was quite nice for Colossus and some of the commanders as well, but that effect is now gone. The Perforator has been reworked to be a little tiny baby diet version of Greg's Reverse Fate with a little less annoyance on the spread. So anytime you hit weak point or crit, you'll launch off these little bombs that'll come off, and you can get some pretty consistent on this. If you have your Perforator fully maxed out, you will actually get 5 bombs from a crit and 1 from a weak point. So you can actually get 5 bombs bouncing off of this. And if you have high enough crit rate, you can actually just get this to pop bombs all over the place. It will hit the original target and any targets around, and you will get a radius increase as you max it out as well, which gives you a nice increase to that. Overall, it turns into a decent blend of single target and AoE, and again, which is basically where Greg's Reverse Fate sits right now. The single target DPS of Greg's Reverse Fate, including the meteors that hit the same target, is decent enough. It's actually quite good. It's not into the same categories as the best single target weapons in the game, but it's very effective and very balanced between single target and AoE, and now Perforator is in the same boat, where you can actually get some pretty good damage, especially if you have high hit on the weak point. You can get some good damage off of that, and you'll get some good AoE, though it's going to be pretty inconsistent in that case, just because, you know, you can't control what direction they run off of. They tend to lean towards enemies, so if you shoot, they try to go towards enemies, but as you can see, it's not super consistent on that. And when you get 5 total on a maxed out Perforator, they could go in all directions, which means they'll almost always hit the main target, but they may or may not hit the targets around it, and it just makes it an overall, like I said, it's like a handheld, like mobile Greg's Reverse Fate, like a Greg's Reverse Fate on the go for delivery that you can use for that damage. Now in this case, again, because it is a hand cannon and won't scale off of sharp precision shot, we're forced to use just some basic scalers on this. It's not big enough mag to gain value out of mental focus, so we're going to use elemental conductors. You're going to be your safe bet for that, and you again want to match that with the element that you're running if you're doing flat elemental attack and elemental enhancement, which I recommend that you do. So just match all those elements up. If you do chill enhancement plus chill attack, you would want to do the snow conductor, whatever, just to get that all lined up. Again, you can run real life fighter here. This will give you a big boost in damage because it does apply to the explosions. But again, I know some people really don't like real life fighter because not only does it require you to hit weak point consistently, which is in some cases impossible or very annoying to do, or they just don't like the loss of accuracy that comes with real life fighter. So if you don't want to go down that road, just get elemental conductor for this in this case. It'll give you a good balance of single target and AoE, which gives you a good boost there. So we do elemental conductor, action and reaction. In this case, we want charge amplification over bullet integration, just because we have lower crit rate and the crit damage is already so high that we can take the hit here, and the firearm attack is going to be more valuable in this case. So charge amplification over bullet integration, then rifling reinforcement, elemental enhancement, fire rate up, better concentration, and then better insight for that extra crit. And in this case, I do really like running reload expert for the bonus to damage, and recycling genius for the reload, because you just want to be constantly shooting to take advantage of the fact that the weak point is very high, the crit damage is very high, the crit chance is very high, the overall AoE is very high, and the firearm attack is very high, which means this weapon is just, it's a meat cannon through and through. And so the biggest limiter in many cases, once you get this far down, ends up being the reload time, just because you know, the diminishing returns and trying to get a small increase to firearm attack or a small increase to crit damage versus being able to increase your uptime for firing. Reload ends up being very highly valued in this build here for that. Then we do firearm attack, bonus attack versus Colossus, flat elemental damage, and crit strike damage for impact rounds. And I think in this case, again, you would match the element across all 3 of these. So the elemental conductor, the elemental enhancement, and the flat elemental attack. Make sure that all 3 of those elements are the same. Next up is the Albion Cavalry Gun. This weapon is now a mobbing weapon and could have some implications towards like bunny based on movement speed. The way this worked before is if the target was stunned, if you shot a stunned target, it would stun the target again and also get some bonus to its efficacy if you were shooting a stunned target. The problem is the weapon came with a very abysmally low crit rate by default, low crit damage, and a 1 weak point scaler. So the stats were abysmal. You needed the target to be stunned, which means that you would only really use it on characters that had a stun in their kit. So characters like Ajax, you would use the stun and then you would use the Albion Cavalry on top of it, which worked well, but it still had the same problem of that the weapon's base damage was so low that you were kind of losing out a lot of damage output to use it. So it's been reworked. The weapon stats are identical. So the DPS output on the base weapon outside of the new passive is the same. It's not anything super special, not anything to write home about, but because you can now equal your crit rate to your proc rate and you have good AoE from it now, your AoE and mobbing DPS in this weapon is actually quite respectable the higher your crit rate goes, which gets even better if you're running Supply Moisture Valby for the extra flat crit rate, Enzo, or even Haley if you wanted to do like a Haley cryogenic build with max crit rate on the weapon. Your proc rate from this weapon equals your crit rate, and it has a flat 30% increase to crit rate as well. So the more crit rate you have for firearm attack, the more you proc, which makes you more of a mobber. So it's very possible that this works great for Valby mobbing or Valby like weapon, gun Valby, or Enzo in groups, or Enzo for mobbing, or specifically Haley as well for that build. So the way this works now is if you shoot a target, you'll see that they get a mark status effect on them. That mark means that while you're shooting a marked target, you will get a much higher crit rate. This is calculated at runtime and it's hard to test just because it's done on the target rather than on your weapon. But as long as you're hitting a target that you've hit before in the last second, you will get an increase to your crit rate. On top of that, if you do crit the target, you'll see that their ricochet will fly out. This can hit 3 targets total. It will ricochet. It procs elemental attack a second time. So you'll notice that if I do this here on him, if I crit, it's doing the toxic bonus on the target as well as the ricochet. So you get a double dip on elemental. That's why we run elemental on this weapon. And it also will stun targets that it ricochets off of. But again, the more you crit, the more you ricochet, the more damage that goes out. So as you're firing on a target, you'll notice that those ricochets can start going higher and higher. And if you have good crit rate on the weapon or crit rate bonus from your character, you can get some pretty serious damage going out to targets, and it's auto-aimed, which is pretty nice. The last effect of the weapon is that as you continue to fire, you will stack up move speed. So as long as you continue to fire and hold it down, you can get some pretty freaking fast. Like you can see how fast I'm going on Freyna. So I'm wondering if there's implications for like a bunny build where you actually do shoot while running. You could even run like colon special forces for extra move speed, and this affects your aimed move speed as well. So there might be some implications there where you could run with a normal bunny while shooting and still get crazy fast movement speed on that. And you can still maintain it here, so you have to kind of get that going, but it is something to think about as the extra weapon proc effect. So the final build on that is going to be Sharp Precision Shot. Works great here. It's about a 92% increase relative to everything else. So I think SPS is the easy winner for this weapon particularly. Action and reaction and bullet integration are going to work great here because we are going to scale up some of the crit rate. Elemental enhancement, rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, and better insight. Remember, your crit rate equals your proc rate. So crit rate gives you a double dip. It gives you crit damage and crit chance, but the crit chance will also raise your proc chance as well because every time you crit, you ricochet. Insight focus gives us another crit chance increase. Better concentration does give us some value because we're critting pretty often, and then weak point sight is a nice bonus there. Firearm attack, bonus attack versus Colossus, flat elemental attack, and crit sight damage. It's interesting that you actually do get some decent value by running crit rate on the reroll here, but I ran the numbers because the flat elemental damage procs twice. It procs on the main target and it procs again on the ricochet target. Flat elemental attack and crit damage tend to outperform crit rate just because you get about 13% on a general rounds weapon for the reroll. So I think this is the best build for the Albion Cavalry Gun. And again, I would encourage you to try experimenting with like an Enzo crit rate bonus with his buff, or Supply Moisture for Valby, or the Haley bonus from her movement slow on top of that, because the more crit rate you have, the more you ricochet, the more damage you do. So those can be some really easy ways to add crit rate outside of the weapon to give you some really nice value out of this. But that's what I got for the 3 new weapons. Overall, really good. I think the Perforator is now quite interesting. I'm going to miss the shield shred, but I think it's going to be pretty good for doing single target and AoE. It's basically another option for Greg's Reverse Fate. In fact, you could run Perforator and Greg's Reverse Fate, and you would be doing good AoE and single target simultaneously. It would cover all your bases. The Albion Cavalry Gun has some nice Descendant bonuses mixed in and can have some very good AoE mobbing, but I still wouldn't run it over things like Enduring Legacy for single target, just because the base stats aren't all that impressive. And the final masterpiece is it's way better than it was before. You can see it increased by almost double the amount to get the value there, but I still think it needs a raw increase. It is a fun weapon to use. It is very flexible, high mobility while you're holding it, but I think it still needs like a little bit, like it needs some more oomph, either fire rate, mag size, reload time, or preferably just more firearm attack based on what it does, but there could be some cool synergies based on the rotating element that goes along with it as well. And let me know about what you think about the new format here, just trying to get through all the weapons quickly so we don't drag it out, and let me know what you think about the new weapon changes down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.